Welcome to Legal Wellbeing in Action, the podcast series of the New Mexico Wellbeing Committee. This year, we'll be focusing on a new campaign called What a Healthy Legal Community Looks Like. Last year, we focused on you, our listeners, as the individual, but this year, the Wellbeing campaign is looking to understand the state of well-being in legal organizations, enlist leaders to help define what well-being looks like for their populace, identify priorities in their community, measure, evaluate, and improve. The New Mexico Wellbeing Committee would love to hear from you and your area of the legal community and work environment. What health and well-being initiatives are in place where you work? What ideas do you and or your colleagues have for improvement? And lastly, what practice, resource, or service is in place where you work that you're particularly proud of? This episode will feature the Office of the Attorney General. Our two speakers, Mr. Hector Balderas, the Attorney General of New Mexico, and Ms. Caitlin Dillon, a prosecutor in the Special Prosecutions Division for the New Mexico Office of the Attorney General, will be sharing what their office does for well-being and really expanding on what their area of the community does to empower their attorneys, paralegals, and staff. From here, I will let our guests take it away. Mr. Balderas, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast with us. Thank you for making time to speak with our listeners about well-being in your area of the community. Ms. Dillon, it is a pleasure to have you back for yet another episode. And lastly, to our listeners out there, thank you for tuning into Legal Wellbeing in Action. If you'd like to leave us feedback or continue the conversation on well-being, please email us at well@sbnm.org. We hope you enjoy.
Okay, thank you, Janessa, for that introduction, and thank you for having us on Legal Wellbeing in Action. Today's episode is about well-being and health in government organizations. And I have a very special guest today. I have my boss, the Attorney General of New Mexico, Hector Balderas. My name is Caitlin Dillon. I work in special prosecutions as a prosecutor. And Attorney General, if you would just introduce yourself to the audience. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for having me. And I look forward to a great conversation. I am the Attorney General, but more importantly, I'm a member of the legal community, and I'm a New Mexican who has chosen to raise a family here and commit my professional career here. So it's really an honor to be part of such an important conversation.
So the place I want to start today is, so you're the Attorney General, you had a huge organization that works all across the state of New Mexico. And I'm looking at our website, and this is our mission statement. We protect New Mexicans in order to make our communities safer and more prosperous. We prosecute criminal and civil offenses, advocate for consumers and those without a voice, empower the public by proactively educating them and connecting them with beneficial resources, and serve as legal counsel for the state and its agents. That's a lot. Would you explain to us in your own words what the Attorney General's office does and what your mission is?
Sure. We often start off either our legal careers or our interest in justice and using the tools, legal tools that we're usually inspired by. And so I always like to start my mission and not look necessarily just at us as attorneys or as lawyers within a legal framework. But my inspiration goes back related to this mission, really not losing touch of what families are going through in the state of New Mexico. And so our mission ultimately is to protect families. And we always start there because the justice system, as you know, is complex, it's unpredictable, it's very stress-driven, and it's a conflict system. And so our mission ultimately is to, in different legal arenas and using the force of law, very different and unique laws, ultimately to protect families. And that really is our central mission. We can do that either as the state's lawyer, and we can represent the state's interest, which is just a group of families to me, or we can represent individual families on a limited basis to really walk them through what will be one of the toughest legal fights of their life. And we have a lot of tools in our toolbox, but ultimately for me, the mission at the Attorney General's office is to be ready, willing, and resourced for whatever walks in our door. And it's a very unique, special jurisdiction that no other law office has in the state. But within the four corners of our borders, we have a unique ability to get into some of the most amazing legal street fights in the nation. And I'm very proud of the work that we do, and then also assembling some of the most talented legal professionals and support staff, and really ultimately driven to drive justice in the state of New Mexico. And it's a great privilege and a real honor. But my motivation really started before I ever became an attorney, and really seeing what families are going through, understanding families in a unique way. We want to go far and above just developing a strong legal relationship with the people we serve. We want them to really redefine their own experience when they get involved with us and create a partnership in our office.
And that's a huge responsibility. And like you said, you employ a lot of talented attorneys, and we get in a lot of legal street fights. What are some of the well-being initiatives, sort of like nuts and bolts things that our office does to make sure that our attorneys are, well enough to do these incredible jobs?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for me, understanding our mission, the first thing I wanted to create was a mindset among our employees, and that we are a team, and that we work well together, and that when we get a unique situation, like a family bringing in a very complex child abuse case, or if there is a family being impacted by a very powerful corporation that really is unfettered in our nation, it's to really bring together a unique set of professionals that is built around defining what a win is. And I think that's a unique management style we have at our office. I don't want my lawyers or my paralegals feeling like the pressure is all on them to win a very difficult case. And so what we do in wellness is we come together. I involve every staff level to really define multiple wins for these families. And multiple wins is just not securing the conviction alone, but we talk about system change. We talk about bonding with families and providing a level of support that some of these families have never seen. We also incorporate wellness into how employees really are redefining what might be a very negative experience for families. A lot of times our families come to us where they have judgments about the justice system, that their cases are falling through the cracks. So I try to take the pressure off our team and lay out with them multiple wins. Ultimately, what that does for wellness is that our legal team not only bonds together, but they start to understand the mindset of the boss and say, look, he's not going to be on me if we lose a motion or if we get a setback. Ultimately, we have multiple battles and multiple wins we're going to engage in. And it really changes the environment. And as we met with victim families just yesterday, you could really see firsthand where our staff, the confidence level, the ability for families to come back and thank our team. There was one in particular yesterday where we were taking photos with victims that have had successful litigation outcomes. But it was wonderful for a Navajo family to ask, we want Casey, our victim advocate, in the picture. And so ultimately, wellness that I realized early on was to stop the blame game, make sure that our team feels well-resourced, and that I care about them both personally and professionally. And so we have all kinds of other strategies in our office. Obviously, the personal well-being of our professional team has to be a priority. We cannot engage in very difficult battles, and we can't be our best if you don't have strong support for the personal well-being as well as the professional well-being of our office. But one of the things I think other agencies and law firms experience setbacks is when there's so much internal pressure on one particular outcome, just win or bill, or don't get the clients mad at us. When there's a disconnect between management and your frontline teams, I often find that it's because they haven't come together and laid out multiple wins, and then also laid out multiple strategies for making sure that we're well-resourced, that we understand all the objectives together. And then ultimately, when you engage in system change and reform and other broader topics, we do put pressure on ourselves. And a lot of times you'll hear me, we'll say, look, maybe losing this case at the very end in front of a jury may be a loss in a legal realm, but ultimately no one is taking these cases on, corporate or individual. So you don't have pressure on our team. The win isn't just trying to get a successful verdict. Ultimately, we're making an impact where we're creating a ripple where ultimately the clients will ultimately walk away and say, no office has ever fought for us this way. So for me, it's connecting the wellness of our team, redefining what objectives are, but then ultimately you should see when we come together, we want our teams to feel like these are rewarding experiences and that a win or loss is not defined on their own shoulders, that I also bear some of the brunt in that. And so you'll have seen me come in and where we meet with victims, I'm in the room. We take responsibility for some of the strategy. And ultimately, I hope it creates a rewarding workplace where you guys feel that you can fight for justice, but that the ugly side of politics and pressure and stress and blame, ultimately my job is to make sure that it's not part of that equation as we engage in some of these challenging battles.
And that mindset has certainly translated down to the line attorney level, because I am a line attorney. And so I see, I'm the one who goes in, on these legal street fights on the big cases. And I remember when I first came into the office, this mindset change was very different for me to have, I think, I was doing a trial and there was just kind of a slight, how trials go, there's something that goes wrong. And I remember the reaction wasn't, it's your fault, you're in trouble. It was, okay, what can we do to support you moving forward? What does this case look like moving forward? Let's think about what's the best path forward. And so for me as a line attorney, when I go into these tough cases, knowing that, it's hard to get 12 people to agree on things, and some of these cases are really difficult, not having that pressure, I think, makes me more process oriented as an attorney. And so I want to turn out the best work product that I can turn out every single day, and not having that pressure. I've been in offices where, your status is defined by a conviction rate, and that's almost an untenable place to work. The other thing I think that I appreciate about our office and about your mindset is that the vision and the goal in every case is very clear. And so I always know where I stand as a line attorney. I always know, this is where I need to go. This is what we need to do. So could you talk a little bit about that? Like, how do you set that vision in every case going forward? Because I think, in lots of places, the goals change too often for people to get settled. And that was one of the major differences in this office in terms of well-being, was I always know where we are and what we're doing. So talk a little bit about, how do you set that? Where does that come from?
Well, and as you were just commenting now, I don't know how often you get to see this, but I get the feedback from the families, because I'm accountable directly to those families as they walk in initially with a lot of their negative judgments. They feel the system has let them down. They feel that no one talks in English to them. They don't trust the legal system. And I can have conversations for hours with my attorney professionals in any professional field that they're in the legal profession. They want to somehow rationalize their degree. They want to rationalize their level of experience. But ultimately, there is predominantly an expectation from clients that they're just going to be cast aside, or that the justice system won't work well for them. And so I've had feedback from these families about your work and other prosecutors and victim advocates. And once that pressure is taken down, there can be a bond and a trust built that, one, they don't see this kind of service every day. And I'm not just talking the legal profession. These are also families that don't trust their public school systems. They don't trust their congressmen who charge them taxes. They don't even trust the city in terms of when they're going to pick up the trash. And so a lot of these individuals, the first thing I'm trying to create is a professional environment where that there'll be at least an opportunity to develop trust. And you should see the raving things that families say about you after you've worked with them on a case. They will not just say, well, she fought for me, or she did a wonderful job. These are non-legal citizens of New Mexico saying that I've never had someone else fight for me like this. And there's a bond there. And so we do have to set up a model where we understand that that the advocacy they're going to receive is not just about a specific legal outcome, because for me, that's cold, that's arbitrary, that's not always measurable in life or death when families are trying to walk into the door. They're trying to get justice, and they're sophisticated people. And so to your question, it really does start the mindset and stepping back, where how many bosses, and this is to all my attorney friends in the legal community, how many bosses are willing to sit with those individual families and consumers and set what the wins will be going through a very difficult legal process? How many, whether it's law firms, state agencies, law enforcement agencies, how many times will a boss be willing to sit with a family on intake and bring a team together, but also be part of what we're about to go through toward in defining a win? That is, while it does present liabilities, most executives would say, no, I don't want to be in that room. The client might have unrealistic expectations. The client might be jaded from other interaction with other lawyers. But for me, because I was raised in a community without any lawyers, in a community that had no resources, I understand that the power dynamic is very important. And we are a very powerful organization. But our first step is to try to redistribute that power and empowerment to those families that we're accountable. And I, as a symbol, use both that first interaction as to redefine what their expectation should be of government, but also secondly, it's to set those goals that they understand will produce a favorable outcome for them. And so the mindset for me really does start, am I willing to sit with these families and troubleshoot with you what the next 5 steps should be moving forward? Once we take those 5 steps with those families and they are educated, they contribute to the process, and they awkwardly have something different to compare their past negative experiences with, it serves to me as a planning tool, as a strategy tool, and as a tactical tool to move forward. And so I'm not afraid of the people that we serve, but a lot of institutions will have a chain of command that puts the executive leadership in an Eiffel Tower, in a tower. And I just don't think that's a good place for government to start. That's one of the first mistakes that organizations can make, is they don't expose their leaders to the very clients that they serve. And that's kind of difficult. But then the second piece that I have profound trust in, you and I will win and lose together. And you guys are more important to the process once we lay out a plan that really, you all are the ones that are going to execute these cases. And I help set the strategy for these cases, but you all ultimately execute. And so really it's about understanding power and dynamics. It's really strategizing transparently with our group. And then it's kind of like breaking down barriers. I mean, the worst thing that we see in the legal profession is that everything is siloed. Everything. MVD wants you to go to TRD. TRD wants you to go to the state bar. State bar needs us to license up. But once I get a license, I'm not going to collaborate with government because I'm in the private sector. And so we try to break those barriers down because the odds are already against us to secure positive legal outcomes. We need every advantage we can take. And so I believe me bonding with the clients and then leaning on you all to come up with the solutions is really a mindset that is rare, but ultimately it serves all of us in the legal community better to lay all that framework out. One of the top complaints we always get from clients, civil or criminal, and you've had this, I mean, you have probably in-laws and cousins that would tell you the same thing in our own families. We don't have information. We don't know what's going on. And so we at our office overload those families with the complete polar opposite. They'll be like, was that really the AG in the room? I don't know. I couldn't kind of tell. It wasn't a ceremonial meeting. It was him listening and asking questions, but he was letting his legal team ask us a lot of questions. We've never had that kind of approach where you have the different team members in an initial meeting, a victim meeting, or a client meeting. And so I don't know where I developed that. I think it was really being raised in Wagon Mountain, understanding that my own mother was afraid to go into these formal environments and felt like these offices don't speak our language. We are poor. We are powerless. We are frustrated. How is it that this team understands our language? And so I think it's important for management of organizations to understand that we can provide complex services, but do we really speak, connect with families? And are we showing them, not telling them? We don't give people a form letter and a complex map on how to work a complicated system. We kind of overload them with who we are, why we're here, and what we want to do for them. And we start right out of the gate. And I know it was a little bit uncomfortable because I remember when you started working with us, it kind of floors prosecutors and it floors people because you're almost afraid, well, wait a minute, am I here to interview the family? I don't want to say something to my boss that I sound inexperienced. And I'm like, no, you're here because you're important into the process. And so that is rare. And I think that kind of mindset, what we just described right now, is really how we manage these cases, right, Caitlin? I mean, you've been in part of a bunch of I call them war rooms.
Yeah.
They're it doesn't matter how the best prosecutors that we recruit, they come to us and they say, this is different how we attack cases. But I hope you find it refreshing. But ultimately, from the wellness perspective, I used to hate bosses who would yell at me and be looking for the mistakes and not understand the big picture, how what we do impacts the bigger picture. They were always worried about how you say something in court, or like you said, are you getting these cases expedited quickly so we can deal with our pressures that we're facing? And I just didn't like that environment. And I'm glad that getting a law degree didn't change my view and the impact that the feelings that I used to have before I ever became a legal professional.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point because we're not robots in suits. We're people. We're people first. And one of the things that this office does, and obviously, we're a little bit slower than other prosecuting agencies, but I do have the time to connect with families and to really get to know them. I do a lot of crimes against children. And so I find a lot of meaning in working with children and just, talking with them about their day. How was your day? Or, during COVID, meeting them at a playground just to, build rapport. And we don't talk about the case. We don't talk about any of that stuff. It's, how was your day? Let's play some basketball so that when we get to the really hard parts of the trial, when we have to talk about what happened, that child trusts us and that family trusts us. And I think that is novel, and I think that's new. And one of the things that I didn't know I needed as a prosecutor was that type of connection to keep finding joy and to keep finding meaning, because we come to people in the worst place in their life, right? They've experienced a trauma, they've been hurt by somebody or something. And, the trial is a place and time. And I think at best we give them an opportunity to move on, but the rest of their life is still their journey. And so, we had that the thing yesterday with the victims, and it was, I saw a family that I hadn't been able to see since we had a successful trial outcome. And I was talking to the victim advocate, and it was the interaction I didn't know I needed as a prosecutor, the closure on that case, to be able to talk to that family and say, and to hear them say, hey, thank you. And for me to say, I'm so happy to have been, a part of your journey, even though, it was a really hard one for you. Thank you. I'm so grateful that I got to help you and to, maybe make something better, because I think we all come in, at least I became an attorney because I wanted to make a difference. I didn't know what that difference looked like, and I kind of fell into this accidentally. But I think, wellness itself isn't just about, taking days off or doing things like that. It's about the work environment that is created and the joy that you find in your work, because we do activism 40 hours a week.
Yeah, two things that I always want you to know, and our secretaries, our paralegals, our special agents, two things that you just kind of highlighted for me, but this is something that I try to work on as well, as much as I can as a manager. Every legal professional has a purpose of why they wanted to become an attorney, and we do lose that. And I think that management with the entire professional team always has to be cognizant on how do we replenish, making sure that you get the opportunity to be grounded in why you wanted and were inspired to become an attorney. You wanted to fight for children, and it sounds cliche, but I can assure you that profit-driven businesses or agencies like ourselves, where there's just unlimited work at the door every day, can be worn down. So if the legal team at the top is focused on profits, or they're competing with other law firms, or the elected officials feel like they're getting beat up in the press and it's really impacting them, I don't want that to be my priority, all those other distractions. My priority is to make sure that my team always feels that they are inspired for why they wanted to be an attorney in the first place. And that's not easy. But you just commented on it, that we all had inspirations on why we wanted to become professional attorneys. But it's easy to lose that. And then the second thing is that when you create these other alternative wins and opportunities to bond with these clients become inspiring. And my other job is to make sure you're consistently recharged, that you are being honest. Do you feel stronger today as a professional, or do you feel beat down? And I know, because I have one of the toughest job interviews to get this job. I have to go out and get a couple of 100,000 New Mexicans to believe that I'm qualified and that they trust me to do this job. And so it's a very stress-driven job. But I'm cognizant that all those demons are going to be at all our doors, paralegals, attorneys. And it's real easy to have that motivation and that mission grounded to become a second-tier priority. And it's also very easy to say that we're connected with our clients and that we're still motivated in serving them, but it's very easy to get beaten down. So I've just heard you describe, two milestone points in your career: what motivates you to become a great lawyer, and making sure that inner child and that young, optimistic individual that put herself through law school, that we stay connected to that person. And then secondly, that, like what yesterday, where families are still wanting to pay gratitude to all of you years later from these cases, ultimately shows that maybe I'm doing my job, or at least our management team. Those to me are the two highest priorities: client expectations and client growth, and what I call self-advocacy. When they're done with us, is our families that are impacted, did they walk away feeling like they're stronger self-advocates, more knowledgeable? One of the things I always tell you, probably this is cliche for you, but when we're in there with your client families, and I tell them that as Caitlin prepares this case, what I'm here to do is, and I'm going to walk with you into the court, I'm going to make sure you feel like you own the courthouse. You own it. You pay taxes. You've been harmed. You hired these judges. The legal team here will take care of all the intellectual and legal advocacy, that you have the best and most well-prepared case to speak your voice. But ultimately, they own the courthouse. And so attorney well-being in our office, that you're still optimistic and excited, and that you don't get worn down, is something we monitor. We care about that because ultimately it impacts how we're going to legally advocate and what our legal successes will be. It's interesting. I'm not bragging about conviction rate. There's a difference between you feeling like we're measuring your worth on the conviction statistic. I don't do that, but I would argue that you guys have among the best conviction rates and legal outcomes in the nation. So then we don't have to set your performance as a bar, as long as you're happy and you feel strong. And so for me, I judge it, after we do an exhaustive case. And yes, I want legal success and legal, I want legal excellence, but seeking justice. Did my family, when they're walking out of that courthouse, and someone like you, do you feel stronger after that exhausting legal litigation? And if we're doing things the right way, I think ultimately we walk out ready for the next fight. But we have to monitor that and talk about this in forums like this, that the wellness, and I study data, and we know about this data, and it's not just in prosecutions. I don't want this era, I'm becoming an older man now, I'm 48. Let's be honest about our legal profession. Why are professional attorneys in all walks of legal expertise feel the most disenchanted with the legal profession? Why are they the most frustrated? Why are they the most cynical in the history of our legal profession? That's something we all should be concerned about, and because it impacts what clients see and feel ultimately. And it can't be just about the money. It can't be just about our own statures and credentialing. And so I feel like what we built at our office, what we do, also could apply in other in other legal expertise areas, that we shouldn't feel like we're bitter and cynical. And so you being in touch with what motivated you as a person, we hope that you're getting replenished at our office and not feeling like you're getting beaten down.
Mm-hmm. And I definitely feel that. I think what's changed over the past couple of years, I think I got here in 2019, is that when I give that case to the jury, like, I'm done. If I have done, my most professional work, if I've done it ethically, if I've done it with integrity, if I have, represented the case to the best of my abilities, that's the win for me, right? Whatever, guilty, not guilty, that's the win for me. And I think when I first started practicing as a prosecutor, that was not the case. And I think, that's something that's allowed me to become a much better attorney, because I'm not scared to lose. I'm willing to try new things, and I'm process oriented. And you mentioned, you're kind of coming to the end of the term. What are some things that you've learned doing this job about wellness? And what are some things that you're like, maybe we should have done that better to take care of our attorneys better? What are some of those things that you've learned?
Well, one thing is really, how we recruit professionals, but also how we really try to honor those promises made early on that, however we recruit professionals, it's important to try to stay in touch with these operations as much as you can, and knowing that things may change, but at least if I am paying attention and I'm listening as best I can, we try to address and support our professionals. And a lot of times we make mistakes too. And so some of the most enlightening conversations have been when I have disappointed an attorney, that they felt like, you know what, you said we were going to have more support and we just have not had that. Or even something like compensation. We don't pay our government professionals very well. And it's not just common to the legal profession in New Mexico. School teachers, we're down 1,000 teachers and 1,000 law enforcement officers on any good day. Well, how can you deliver justice when the front end of the system is strained and then the back end of the system is strained with law enforcement professionals? How is it that that's not going to have a ripple effect on our prosecution practice? It does. And so sometimes, wellness is about checking in where you're failing on your processes and how you recruit people, and really getting into an ugly issue sometimes, like, well, you know what, the pay raises haven't come through. The legislature hasn't funded those the way we wanted to. So a lot of times it's just sitting down, and what ends up happening is that I'll learn from one of the line attorneys that initially their frustration might be about a pay raise or lack of resources that were promised. But ultimately, it's a lot of times they're overworked, and a lot of times they just needed an ability to vent and be listened to. And then, as you know, the conversation serves well for me, because a lot of times out of that conversation, we'll start to strategize a plan on trying to make the justice system better outside your own job duties. And that kind of is cathartic, and it's almost healing in and of itself. It's acknowledging what could grow into being a bigger wellness problem. In other words, I don't feel appreciated, or I'm angry, and so it impacts my work. A lot of times, having conversations about how the justice system is impacted beyond your job duties and beyond the initial caseloads serves both me and management, as well as the frontline team in many ways. As you know, I've rambled on. Gosh, I've involved all of you in changing legislation. I have asked prosecutors to step in when it's not part of your job description. Some of your own colleagues, rather than us complain just about what we don't control, like pay raises. And right now, New Mexico everyone knows that the justice system is failing and under strain. Well, how come we're not blaming other agencies, and why are we, where are we getting the strength to go out and legislate for murdered, missing, and Indigenous women, and then pass a bill all in 1 year and go get $1 million from our own accounts? By the way, from the legislature didn't fund that. Our own office funded that with litigation dollars we bring in from our civil side. Where is it that you all as prosecutors found the strength to not look at just everything that's happening against us negatively? Where is it that you found the strength to go pass a bill for an underprivileged class of Native American families? The other one is the rape kick backlog. Studying the system and how it impacts. And I think so. Something for me that strengthens your wellness is that we try to address the small problems, do an assessment of what we control and what we can't control, and then a lot of times you become partners with me in trying to get pay raises, trying to expand justice services for murdered, missing Indigenous women. And I know that because that's how I get the exhaustion and the fatigue, and most importantly, trying not to become jaded. I think those are all issues that lead to alcohol abuse, drug abuse, losing touch with who you are, becoming isolated away from friends. This can happen to any attorney who's taking on these very tough cases. But I don't have a lot of money to offer you in pay raises. But what we do is we say, look, there's a ton of opportunity to be inspired, recharge yourself, and make the justice system better. And I don't do that for clinical advantage. There's a clear leadership advantage when we all operate like that. But it does, I believe, also have a potential positive clinical benefit that then we're much more honest and able to talk about, do some of our attorneys need counseling? Do some of our attorneys need, you see me going out and hiring external professionals when we're overworked. I'm not afraid to do that. And then one other area that I just want to close on this question is like, wellness is about you all knowing kind of what tough day I'm having. And I involve you on, sometimes the press doesn't report things in a way that's helpful, or they're everybody's engaged in their own business. And so I try to have those conversations, and I hope it makes for a stronger, healthier unit ultimately, that you feel like at least, hey, I get a good sense of what that guy's dealing with and what I'm dealing with. And I think it's natural. I think ultimately you do want to work like a team. And that is ultimately what I know we do control, is how we respond to these stressful challenges. And also that we fight when something's happening to us, when the legislature doesn't want to fund us, when the media needs education on cases that are falling through the cracks. What is it that we can do to make a difference? You guys are ultimately more valuable than me on that equation, but that is part of our other mindset, is that I think we call it, we have three priorities in our mission. One is protecting families. Two is using the legal system in an innovative way. And then this third one that no one ever knows what it is. But justice, leadership for justice. What is that? Well, ultimately, that's always what you guys put together when we're responding to something that we can't be quiet about, like the murdered and missing Indigenous women. You guys were the first unit to ever pass that, but it was you all understanding that, hey, we need to step into that hole and see if we can fill it with something positive. And I think ultimately that makes for stronger, healthier, well-grounded attorneys that can deal with what is really an untenable level of stress, burden, under very difficult conditions. And so I try to build in knowing that we are both going to be worn down as human beings, but how are we recharging ourselves? And I'm proud that that's an actual official model. That's not something that we're being told by a doctor, hey, you need to clinically respond to these guys. They're getting worn down. And we do that in collaboration and with a complement toward embracing some of those other positive wellness aspects that I always encourage. We talk about our office. One of the things I'm most proud of is we're very family centric. We not only serve families, but if you have kids, dogs, pick up your child at 3:00, go get them and bring them home, bring them here. We're willing to do the tough work. I encourage you to do the work that you want to do when you want to do it, when you can do it, paying attention to your personal obligations as well. And so it's easier for our prosecutors to write briefs at 8 or 9 at night because they got to go pick up a child at 4:00. We are built trying to acknowledge that we need you all, strong families at home, in order to provide great service and authentic service to some of the most challenged families in the state of New Mexico.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with that. I think one of the things I didn't know about this office was working for that type of change for, the missing and murdered Indigenous women. I was there when that bill was signed, and I wasn't necessarily involved with that process, but I got to watch it. And I think, that started off as, what some people may characterize as a pie in the sky, but what you always say as a leader is bring it to me. Let's see what happens.
Absolutely.
One of the best things you said to me is, if this is what you want to do, how can I support you and how can I stay out of your way and make sure that you are protected to do the job that you need to do? And I think that's incredible.
Yeah, and it's built into our mission and our DNA. And I'm, as someone who has to justify to the voters and to taxpayers, it actually produces better results than other operations that are very mechanical or very chain of command only. We're all those things as well, but that X factor that you're just talking about now has transformed families, and I'm very proud of the work that you guys do.
Mm-hmm. The intangibles of the work environment that create huge and massive success for us, I think, is one of the great things why I'm very honored and very privileged to work for this office and to continue that work. So thank you so much for being here, Attorney General Hector Balderas. I really appreciate it, taking the time to talk with us. And thank you for listening to Legal Wellbeing in Action. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. This episode was produced by the State Bar of New Mexico's Wellbeing Committee and the New Mexico Judges and Lawyers Assistance Program. All editing and sound mixing was done by Blue Sky eLearn. Intro music is by Gil Flores. The views of the presenters are that of their own and are not endorsed by the State Bar of New Mexico. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, or legal advice. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition.